All right, looks like we're live in the main chat and all right, there's a vertical, I think. Yep. Wow, we got them both tonight. All right, guys, so sacred medicine is on the table for discussion tonight. Obviously, psychedelic medicine is basically a miracle. I certainly would not be the person that I am today without it, and I think the world would be quite dreary without the influence of psychedelics. If you look back at the United States in like the 1950s and then imagine where we would be without the influences that kind of grew out of the psychedelic culture, it's pretty nightmarish, I think. The expansion of awareness and our ability to sort of create a homeostasis between the pentagram of ourself. And what I mean by that is in the Hermetic tradition, they speak of balancing the pentagram, which is about the five elements, if you include spirit or light or ether, however you want to think about it. And then each of the elements represents also, or is a metaphor for some aspect of our emotional, intellectual, of our being. And the particular thing that I want to get into tonight, because it's something I haven't talked about, I don't think, with psychedelics, has to do with increasing intelligence. And the reason that I thought about this is that I was just doing research and I saw that there was some dispute about whether or not psychedelics could actually increase IQ. And that's kind of insane because it's not really a matter of debate. Psychedelics have been under clinical circumstances. Sorry, guys, I'm a bit distraction for a second here. There we go. It's not like it's common, but I think it was either at Stanford or Princeton or Johns Hopkins, 2 out of, I want to say 1,000 subjects that had normal or below normal or average IQs, spontaneously, there was like genius induction, right? They were geniuses suddenly, and that remained true after the case. So with that research, it was kind of strange for me to see that. And just generally, small increases have been recorded all across the board. And so their argument was that it's not that it didn't increase IQ, the psilocybin or LSD in particular. It's that this was an underlying characteristic. It was already, what is the word, latent in the person and had been, unearthed by these psychedelic experiences. I really don't see what the difference is. But what it led me to thinking about was the balancing of the different emotional and intellectual aspects in us, right? We have intuitive intelligence, spatial intelligence, emotional intelligence, and the reality is if there is a bad enough imbalance in that constitution, say your emotional intelligence, your EQ is super, super low, you will end up weaponizing your own IQ intelligence against yourself so that you're actually worse off being highly intelligent, right? So when you are able to create a greater degree of homeostasis in these things, this offset, this imbalance has the potential to completely revolutionize the way that you process information, the way that you interact with people. There is no central mechanism that psychedelics act on because all of these things are so inextricably intertwined, so stiff. Where was I going with that? Yeah. So, the domino effect of psychedelic healing, tremendous impact. And it turns out that this goes far beyond just our personality and our mood. It revolutionizes potentially our intention in the world. And it allows us to create something that is profoundly satisfying in an intuitive way, in a natural, organic, uncontrived, and authentic manner that is fundamentally consistent with who we truly are. And it's my opinion that the dissonance that has been inculcated into the general population by the lack of priority of self-discovery, self-knowledge, and self-expression is what has got us hurling full throttle into the abyss right now. And the only way to pull it back is to rapidly re-engineer the self-strata of the individual, but on a collective level and with lightning speed. And psychedelic medicine, in my opinion, is the primary tool to enact that. Time be running out. Let me check in with the chat. This is basically an AMA, you guys. If you have any questions or anything you would like me to specifically address, I'm here for that. It's going to be a small group tonight. For some reason, on Friday nights, it's just always like that for me. But I wanted to pop on because last night the internet went out here. That's why I scheduled a stream and didn't show up. I hate that. But right as I started to turn my camera on, the internet went out and didn't come back on until this morning. So that's why I didn't show up. And also I want to let you guys know that I have one more spot for the first 11 days of our retreat starting on July 11th. And then, I didn't even really notice that they booked for 11 days. It's a whole family. And they start on the 11th, so 11/11. But then the rest of the month until August 11th there's a couple of spots, 2 or 3. And then Manu, we have spots, which is going to be in the rainforest. The first event is in the Sacred Valley. So if you're interested in that, shoot me an email. And I was doing just 24 hours if you deposit, and only for the Sacred Valley event. But because I missed the stream last night, I'm going to extend it till Monday morning, I guess. So this weekend, if you make a deposit, 50% off, including Manu, which wasn't part of the deal before. So there's that also. And super excited about that. I haven't been talking a lot about plant medicine and psychedelics lately because I haven't been thinking much about it. I've been much more focused on mathematics and physics and writing and stuff, But with the event coming up, I started to bust out the charango to brush up on my medicine songs, and I really started thinking about all this again, and the tremendous promise and also the disappointment that I've had in regards to psychedelic medicine in general. I started to notice it after getting involved with the jam band scene for a while when I was younger and kind of naive, I guess. When I first took psychedelics, I thought, man, this is the catalyst that is just going to snap any douchebag out of his douchery. It can cure alcoholism, anxiety, depression. I knew all that. The second time I took LSD with a friend of mine at like 15, I remember telling him, like, dude, I think this stuff could treat like every mental illness known to man. And I really thought that we could pretty much fix anyone just by dosing them, which is what the, really early hippies, like the Grateful Dead scene, they thought that as well for 2 years or something until they realized that wasn't the case, And our culture has kind of safeguards embedded in it against the dissolution, of the mind-forged manacles that it kind of imposes upon people. One of the things I wanted to get into tonight, and I guess I'll do it now, is the fact that psychedelics actually do expand consciousness. This is not a figure of speech or hyperbole. It's a literal thing that happens. They have done scans on the brains of tripping people, and there is electrical activity in parts of the brain where there normally is never any. And they have compared these to like master monks from Tibet, that even at their highest states of meditation, they don't reach the same level as people on psilocybin in terms of the speed of the highest cycles that they emit, and they don't have the electrical activity in these normally sort of dormant parts of the brain. And as soon as I heard about that, I thought, I bet that's because that's where our sort of parapsychological type cognitive capacities are managed. And one of the things holding people back, I think, and holding this sort of movement back and limiting the efficacy of these kind of experiences is the sort of cultural assumptions that are imposed on us. It's something like institutionalized gaslighting. The idea that psychedelic compounds are actual gateways into experiences of the paranormal, right? Interactions with spirits or telepathy or precognitions. It's generally dismissed as you're high and therefore you're imagining stuff stupid and you might be losing your mind. Earlier I was kind of referencing these researchers that were questioning the IQ increasing capacity of psychedelics. And that's part of the reason, I think. The institution is afraid, they want you to believe that those kind of experiences are drug-induced madness. They want you to believe that these things are dangerous and they make you stupid. To be forced to acknowledge that you could actually induce genius in a person with a below average IQ with a single dose, like I said, very rarely, but it has happened, is quite a threat to the status quo. Transconscious knowledge reception is also something that they do not like to even consider. And I don't really blame them. If you spent 18 years getting an education, and then somebody like me comes along and anticipates some abstract physics concept, years before it actually is confirmed in the lab, that really pisses them off, and they also, it's a threat to their control of information and knowledge. The conspiracy theorists often go kind of, it's not really too far, but it's more paranoid, I guess, than I think reality supports, in the sense that the government, the overlords, don't necessarily even have to directly censor and buy scientists and control them, because the subconscious takes care of a lot of that for us. They're going to be extremely defensive of the old ontological model and all of the institutionalized ways of thinking, because they're very dependent upon that. They're dependent upon it for their credibility. They're dependent upon it for their livelihood, for their sense of safety, and after when was Einstein? 1920 something, I think or 30s when he published his big thing. About 100 years, you could say 150 years of building the current abject materialist ontological model, and then suddenly it's getting washed away in a torrent of revolutionary new paradigm type ideas. Very uncomfortable for people that are deeply entrenched in that system. So, yeah. And I'm sure you guys can tell, when people nowadays talk about psychedelics, it's almost entirely about emotional healing. And I'm all about that, man. I had a narcissist mother and, screwed up dad. And I definitely needed a lot of help, and psychedelics did a tremendous made a tremendous contribution to that development. But I'm definitely much more interested in the big picture impact, the consciousness based aspects and the revolutionary aspects of it, which are derived from, in part, those emotional changes. Check in with the chat again and see if you guys have questions or subjects. Nope, nobody's got nothing. Well, thank you for saying that this is cool, and if you think it is cool, please consider hitting the like button, subscribe and turn on your bell notifications, consider becoming a patron because we're demonetized, and when you're demonetized, you're also deprioritized. So not only do I not get paid by YouTube, but my videos don't get pushed out very much, so it's very difficult to fund anything like that. So we do appreciate support. Where was I going with that, though? I was thinking about pulling up this conversation that I had with ChatGPT earlier, because it was really remarkable how the AI is able to articulate things. One of my main MOs, I guess, is to try and build a bridge between the scientific paradigm, I guess, and I hate saying spirituality because I don't really think of it that way. I think that it's scientific illuminism is maybe a better word, but one of the solutions, I think, to the sort of gridlock that we find ourselves in ontologically is that we do need to be able to explain things to people. We have to be able to articulate how things like telepathy are possible and how there could be a universal mind that has like oversight in the evolutionary process, right? Or, any of these things. And the reality is that in this universe, there is a mechanism behind everything. So if telepathy is real, there's a mechanism of action that underlies it, and incredibly, we are getting to the point where science is finding the potential mechanisms to explain things like teleology or an integrated intelligence in the fabric of the universe, or how some sort of intelligence could have oversight in the evolutionary process, and we have solid evidence that there must be these things. And the reality is that without psychedelicized minds, there wouldn't be anybody looking to connect the dots like that, and it's also interesting and a little bit alarming to me that in the scientific community, the people that are making these discoveries don't really seem to be connecting those dots either, And why is it important? Why does it matter? Well, what is a transcendental experience? What is it really? When Aleister Crowley wrote that God is concealed in nature, what did he mean? Well, you guys probably know that we perceive less than 1% of this full spectrum of light. And in my, well, it's not my opinion. It's my opinion about psychedelics and whatever spectrum they uncover. But it is true that different spectrums of light carry different types of information, right? So we see some fragments of the visible light, and it carries that type of information, so we can perceive what's around us, right? But what else is there? And Aldous Huxley, 100 years ago or something, suggested that there's a reducing valve in the nervous system that psychedelics adjust, right? And so different compounds adjust different bandwidths to different degrees, and that's why there's overlap in the psychedelic experience, but then there's also variation, right? It's not exactly the same, mescaline and psilocybin, but there's definite like visual similarities, and similar things happen in the mind. So that has always made sense to me. And I was thinking a while back about how pupils dilate in full light when you take psychedelics, because they are taking in more light and a wider spectrum. So everyone that takes psychedelics sees these certain patterns sort of hanging in the air, and I know that everyone sees them the same way because artists that are capable of reproducing them have reproduced them. So we know we have a consensus. And if, you have 50 people in a room looking at a glass bottle and they all describe it more or less the same way, then you agree there's actually a glass bottle there. It's a real thing, right? Reality is consensus. Or at least there is consensus reality, right? So that's my feeling about that. That one of the reasons we have all these insights and we make all these connections and even have intuitions about the wiring under the board in the universe, the mechanisms that are still undetected by physics, for example, is because we are processing part of the light spectrum that we normally can't perceive. There's more to it than that, though. And the rest of this stuff, I don't have any good mechanistic explanation for, but the reality is enough people have reported an increase in synchronicities, precognitions, telepathic experiences, even the ability to sort of walk right into your dreams, as I did like 13 years ago or something, after, a profoundly powerful psychedelic experience. It's as if when you change the parameters of your perception, the universe expands in terms of what possibilities are available to you. These things are more difficult to explain, but part of the reason for it, at least, is that the transcendental experience that I referenced and then went off on a side tangent before concluding is really about having a more holistic perception of what the universe is and what your place in it is. It's about expanding the parameters of your perceptual apparatus and having a more holistic perspective on what it all is and how to relate to it. And it seems to me that when people are exposed to that, when the filter is temporarily disengaged, the changes that occur, while not ubiquitous or absolute or 100% consistent, are overwhelmingly positive. Because I think, one of the sort of, I guess, philosophical constituents of our reality, metaphysical elements, I don't really know how to talk about it, but a thing that is often missed is that we talk about how the rational, cold universe is just a mechanistic, it's just a logical thing. It does shit out of necessity, and that's all true, right? And we kind of have this institutionalized opinion that people that talk about treating the human race as one and seeing it as one continuous organism and kind of valuing the other in the same way that you do yourself. What are you but my reflection? Who am I to judge or strike you down? Kind of attitude that is irrational. And that the sort of spiritual disposition is unnatural almost. And I think what psychedelics and other methods of consciousness expansion actually show you, they don't even need to show you. It's almost like it's just more like an integration or something, that's not true. That it actually is logical and natural and actually a sort of like love is an emergent property of the convergence of natural laws, and what we have learned over thousands of years of the aggregation of historical evidence is that if you try to impose rules upon people, or if they try to impose rules upon themselves just by effort of, willpower, it doesn't work. The Christian is a hypocrite. The Muslim is a hypocrite. It doesn't work. The law-abiding citizen oftentimes is actually a criminal, The real truth is that these experiences of wholeness, the universe is not just holographic, it is also holotrophic. or holotropic. It is moving towards unity. The direct experience of that catalyzes internal changes that actually mean something. And really, I started this live stream out talking about the balancing of the pentagram, the bringing the different aspects of our being into homeostasis. That's really what wholeness is. It is the complete absence of any imbalance. That is what entropy is doing. That's what the universe is, an equation balancing. And when you hit that 0 point where everything is applying equal influence, you have an absolute perfection and homeostasis. And once that occurs, you are a star in your orbit, and stars don't collide with other stars. The tendency of every single system in the universe is towards homeostasis. So when we see in human culture a continued degradation and increased dissonance, we know that it's because of an unnatural influence. That's not how things work. In the United States right now, 70% of the population has a significant mental health issue. 70%. 70%. They say 70% of the boomer generation are narcissists, or 70% have narcissist tendencies, and 40% of them are full-blown narcs, which means that we have an entire generation of, millennials and Generation Xers, half of which, or more than half of which, if you want to include the boomers with just narc tendencies that aren't full-blown, 70% narc parents. If you think that's normal and natural, you're probably an American that was raised by boomers that were narcs. It's not. So much of what we have not even been told, a lot of lies become just integrated into the structure of society, and then they become assumptions for later generations. And those assumptions are like foundations that everything is built upon. And that's what's been happening for, I don't even know, a long time, but particularly intense and bad over the last 50 or 75 or something. We do got answers, and we do got solutions, though. I'm checking with the chat again, see how you guys are doing. Electric Ninja, have you seen Goler's Discovery? Yeah, I have. I watched some of that. Hold on, let me read. Uh-oh. Well, why'd you do that, Christopher? When you're on LSD, you're on a different plane of reality. I don't think it's really a different plane. I think it's just more of this plane. I really do. I don't even know if I believe in different planes. I don't see any necessity for it. Consciousness is possibly infinite, and I don't think that we really need a bunch of different phases of reality in order to experience infinity. We just need a process. Goler's Discovery, what they found out. Yeah. Let me think about that. I don't really know what to say about it in a way because, if you shine a laser and smoke DMT on any object you look at, you're going to see code. And it's not just DMT. LSD, I noticed probably the second time I ever took it or something. I was pretty young. I almost got hit by a car. I just remembered right before this because I just didn't think and I just ran out in the street. I almost became one of those LSD horror stories. But anyways, when we got across the street and I didn't die, we went into a, it wasn't really a sewer tunnel because it was too big. I don't know what it was, but it's big tunnel, concrete tunnel, and I looked at the wall and I saw these what looked like 3D letters that were kind of morphing and changing, and then I saw Alex Gray's wife, I think her name's Allison, had painted what she claimed was a language that she had seen on LSD, and it was all the same characters. So I guess what I'm saying is I don't really know what exactly to think of that. It's also interesting, though, to connect it to the fact that the Shuar, who I learned about ayahuasca from in part, their creation story is very, very similar to the tribe of Judea. Basically, the tribe of Judea had the three mother letters, which correspond to the three elements. Most ancient cultures actually had three elements because earth is derivative of the other three. So it's not a real element in the same way that gravity is probably not a real force. It's sort of a product of the other three doing stuff, So anyways, the three mother letters gave birth to other letters, and there ended up being 22, I think, and these sounds basically created the universe. This is what the logos was, these vibrations that compelled the chaotic primordial energetic stew to arms and order by means of symmetry, right? Through the oscillating wave, it's oscillating and it's symmetrical, so order is imposed. But anyways, the Shuar have basically the same story. It just struck me as really odd that these two basically indigenous cultures had exactly the same concept of how the universe was formed. So maybe that's what it is, maybe it is the coding of the universe. And by the way, even if there is a coding language in the universe, I don't think that it implies that we're in a simulation, right? And even if it does, who cares, kind of, because that still doesn't answer anything. Okay, if there's simulators, then who simulated the simulators? And is it simulations all the way down? Who created it doesn't do any, it doesn't help, it doesn't do anything, And one of the main reasons it actually bugs me is that it seems like a divergence or something. Like they'll do anything to try to get around saying there's evidence of a creator or at least some sort of integrated intelligence in the universe. And saying, it must be aliens that are simulating because we found code that implies that, what else does it imply? And why don't we ever hear that from these people? You know what I mean? Was I clear about that? Origins of different entheogens? Okay, so first things first. Somebody asked if you've had problems with mushrooms, does it mean you can never take them again? That's not enough information. First of all, it depends on what you mean. If you had like a prolonged psychosis as a result of, is your mom or dad schizophrenic? You know what I mean? There's a lot of questions that need answered, like how severe, what was the nature of the problem, but in general, I would say no. I had a problem once on mushrooms that resulted in consequences, nothing too terrible. I also had this experience where I would get something I called like the mushroom flu, for lack of a better word, and it was one of the worst feeling things I've ever experienced. And it happened 2 or 3 times, and I was really hesitant to eat mushrooms again after that. It was kind of like being poisoned. There's no way to describe it, but it was horrible, absolutely horrible, and it lasted forever. And it turns out probably it was a perinatal memory, reliving something from when I was in the womb. That would be the answer according to Stanislav Grof's research. And what they say happens is that you can take a psychedelic, and if your mother like consumed something toxic or had a really serious emotional, toxic episode of any kind, the psychedelic can sort of bring that experience back and you sort of relive it. The problem is that I didn't have any connection between the experience and any sort of memory. So it was just like this Russian roulette game, maybe I'll be fine and it'll be amazing, and maybe it'll be absolute hell, and I just really didn't want to do it for a long time. And it actually probably hurt me considerably because I had other problems that needed to be dealt with at the time, And the reason that I figured out that Stanislav Grof is probably correct about this is that once I had sorted through a bunch of mother-related trauma stuff, the mushroom flu never happened again. So, your question is very complex, and it's not something that I would want to give a really like advice about without like a deep interaction, but yeah, that's the best I can say about it. It could be a matter of dosage. It could be a matter of just something that you had to process once in your life. I've only had one experience, I guess, that could be even called a bad trip, and it wasn't even that bad. But a lot of scary moments, so I guess the best thing to do is to start mildly if you're going to go back there. Just don't put yourself in a position where you could be overwhelmed, and then you can navigate it and take baby steps so that you don't get yourself into trouble. But that's what I would do, because if you had a rough experience because of some kind of trauma or, something other than psychosis, latent psychosis or schizophrenia, you probably need it. There's nothing that is going to be more efficacious at helping you discover and work through these things than psychedelics. No therapist, it's the best tool that we have. It definitely is. Without a doubt. So let me check the chat for more. Oh, theories about the origins of different psychedelics. There's really no way to think about that. Why they exist in nature is totally baffling. Terrence McKenna, I remember reading him talking about how, they have to serve some kind of function in the plant. There's nothing in anything that doesn't do something for the thing it's in. That's everything serves some kind of purpose. And what exactly the function of these compounds could be in a mushroom that doesn't really do a whole hell of a lot, or a vine or a cactus, and that could actually also not be true. They could just be sort of analogs or derivatives of interactions between various, We really don't know. Along those lines, though, something I will share is that this is really difficult to articulate, but things are only capable of effects of which they are, like innately that they contain, that are of their essence. You know what I mean? And I've always kind of felt like things that are closer to the core of reality, I guess you could call it divinity, right? They express those characteristics. And in the case of psychedelics, I think there's evidence for that. It's anecdotal, but I find it to be evidence. We were talking at the beginning of the stream about how IQ increase and EQ increase, memory enhancement, all of these things are possibilities when you take these compounds. And on one level, it's because of enhanced neuroplasticity and neurogenesis, right? But that's just a chemical level. The transcendental experiences are, I think, often confused with the chemical level, as if the chemicals are like a CD that you read with a laser in your brain, or something, like you're like running a program. But that doesn't really make any sense. It's not like the compound has this experience in it or something. You know what I mean? I guess what I'm getting at with that is that, say, a strong dose of DMT, for example, you could be confronted with 11-dimensional objects. Your brain has never had to try to make sense of something like that before, right? So it has to adapt physically in order to process the experience it's having. That's what I think anyways. And so the fact that these compounds, let's take LSD in particular, because it's actually the most potent in terms of catalyzing neurogenesis and enhancing neuroplasticity. I totally lost my train of thought there, though, speaking of those things. Oh, yeah, okay. So it also has built into it anti-abuse mechanisms, because if you take it, day after day after day, it'll just stop working. You have to at least double the dose, and within a week or so, it's not going to do anything, even if you triple, quadruple, right? So it has an anti-abuse mechanism built into it. Despite what people might have told you, there is a ceiling as well. So at 2,500 micrograms, you've reached a saturation point and you cannot process anymore. And no, you will not get stuck tripping for 3 days. People that say that either had some sort of psychosis, which I guess is possible, or they're exaggerating or something, because there are 10 people on the medical record that consume 20,000 micrograms roughly each and were back to baseline between 8 and 12 hours, had no flashbacks. They were all checked on 5 years later. No one had any major psychological problems. It was not an extended experience because your synapses are loaded and the rest just washes through, and that's it. You know, you can't. The overdose of LSD, I think, is a gallon or something, a half gallon or a gallon, you know, and that would be like more than $500,000 probably. So no one's going to do that, you know? So what I was getting at there is that we have this induction of a transcendental experience along with a mechanism that a biochemical mechanism that allows the brain to become more adaptable during this period so that it can process and adapt and change, so that you can write new programs. You're being inspired in ways that cause behavioral changes, you know, and so you have the ability to rewire these habitual things so that these behavioral, the intentions of these behavioral changes actually can sort of route their networks and get you started on that path so that they're actually meaningful transformation. You know what I mean? It's a little much that these compounds were so well engineered by nature for safety, efficacy. You know, it really looks like something was thinking about what they do and how they would be best at it. And I'm not even saying that that's not necessarily a product of evolution, because I think that the universal mind, it's not like the Christian fundamentalist thinks, where it's either a creator and everything was as it was created in the beginning, or it's evolution, right? It's a process of refinement over time, and there is an integrated intelligence involved, you know? There's a lot of things I don't really see a better explanation for than that, and psychedelics are one of our best bits of evidence, I think. Because that is a hell of a coincidence that all those aspects just happen to be true of this molecule, you know. Like, not only is it not a drug of abuse in the way that alcohol or other things are, it has mechanisms built into it to make it like not even possible without a lot of effort, you know, to consistently abuse psychedelics. The easiest, best tech for San Pedro is on a video on my channel. Golden Teachers never really did anything for me. Well, sorry to hear that. I mean, it's probably not the mushroom. It was your brain state, your diet, the particular mushroom, when it was grown, how it was harvested. The one thing that I can offer about that could support the idea that a different strain had a different effect on you is that they recently discovered, not too recently, but within the last 6 years or so, that psilocybin mushrooms actually contain harmala alkaloids, which do interact with psilocybin, and in different ratios and different analogs. So there's an entourage effect that occurs with different types of mushrooms that could explain why some of them don't have much of an effect on a certain person. Like, you may have a metabolic salt in your stomach, for example, that destroys psilocybin, and there is a harmala alkaloid in sufficient quantities to render that metabolic salt inactive, so the psilocybin works. You know, we have very, very complex biological systems, biochemical systems, you know, and highly individualized. So you never know. And then there's also the fact that, like, an ayahuasca dieta, you know, a lot of that is kind of hype from the industry because of either vegans with agendas or people just wanting to enroll people in, 6-week long, $7,000, grass diets and you know what I mean? I'm not saying they're useless at all. I'm just saying that a lot of it is hype. But if you're a shaman and you have a very highly specific task that you need to be attenuated to in very subtle ways, the different enzymes and the reactions produced by the interactions of enzymes, or the byproducts that are produced, and the way they interact with the compounds in the plants and whatnot, that all is highly, highly engineerable, and I think learning about that kind of helped me to understand how differentiated the biome of the gut can be in different individuals, and kind of explains the wildly different reactions that people can have to psychedelic medicines. It's really extreme. The same person drinking the same medicine, completely different reactions. No reaction on one person and the other person completely overwhelmed. Sometimes I've even seen where a person drinks almost nothing and has, terrible reaction, and another person drinks the same medicine and has 6 cups and they're lightly affected. It's really a wild thing, especially with ayahuasca. Ayahuasca seems to have a mind of its own. Really, dosage almost doesn't even matter. I've literally seen at least 3 times, 3 different people take a shot and vomit it up within like 2 minutes or less, and then they have the strongest experience of their entire lives. It doesn't make any sense. That shouldn't be able to happen. But I've seen it happen, like I said, with at least 3 different people. I think I did it once too, where I threw up almost immediately, and I was like, oh, well, I guess I'm not gonna, and then almost immediately too, I was like, oh, wow, it's already, and vice versa, where you can drink a ton and then just have a strong experience for 10 minutes and it just goes away. It really seems to, it's like once it engages with your nervous system, it seems to know what needs to happen. It just kind of determines its dose itself. And I'm not saying that drinking another cup or whatever doesn't do it, does, but still, it really seems to be able to, or it engages the mind and body interface in a way, or allows them to engage in a way that the mind and body know how to sort it out for you to make it what you need it to be. Quite a remarkable thing. It has all sorts of abilities that really don't make a lot of sense. When I was learning, at one point I was sitting next to the shaman I was working with, and he was trying to get me to start singing, because I wouldn't sing for some reason. When I drank ayahuasca, everyone would sing and I would just sit there. And he didn't like that at all, especially because I was the student, and he didn't like that. So after 4th or 5th night that I was actually apprenticing, he came in and cornered me, and I was like, but I don't know what the words are. And he's like, you don't need words, just make sounds. And so I started doing it, and the medicine started moving parts of my body that I didn't know existed, that I didn't know you could move, at least. My throat muscles were moving on their own in ways that I never would have imagined possible, so that I could make sounds that I never could have conceived of, and then it also would happen in my gut and around my ribs and stuff. The medicine's teaching you the icaros or physically manipulating your body so that you're able to make the sounds appropriately. On another occasion, I was singing alone because that was part of it. I had to sit alone and drink ayahuasca by myself and try to receive the icaros. And at one point, the medicine, the narrator was telling me, you have to make 2 different pitches that are out of phase at once, kind of like throat singing, but not quite. And they're out of phase at first because that dissonance sort of catches the energy in the room, and then you bring the pitches into harmony, or actually you make them unison again. And this brings the dissonance in the room into consonance. Anyways, checking with the chat again, see what's up with y'all. I always fast for 24 hours. Jeez, man. I'm on the fence about fasting with psychedelics because I feel like having energy. I mean, it depends on what you're doing. You know, I actually eat a lot closer to drinking ayahuasca than a lot of people would, because I found that I have more focus and strength if I have a little bit of food in me. Okay, so guys, remember, question and answer time, AMAs. I am still booking for the retreat in July, and you get a discount if you deposit by Monday on either one. And Manu is going to be awesome. It's pristine jungle, and almost all of the biodiversity is intact. So there are giant anacondas, jaguars sightings are as common as anywhere in the rainforest. Macaws, you know, the salt licks where the macaws all come, there are those. I think like 30 species of monkeys and 33 tribes. We're going to have Ashaninka guests, and probably others, you know, while we're there, if we meet people that are, you know, indigenous and interesting and I can vet them, then maybe we'll invite them over, you know. Definitely part of our plan is to, even if we don't drink medicine with, you know, a lot of the locals, just because we don't know them, we'll at least have them come and share with us, you know. And we may also import Mama Juanita from Pucallpa, and she is probably the most amazing person that I've ever worked with. They have like a hierarchy, kind of, that's not the right word, graded system in the Shipibo tradition, and she is the highest possible designation, and she is just the power of this woman when she sits in front of you and sings a cleansing Ikaro. It's like sitting in front of a positivity hurricane, you know. It's just like, it's absolutely mind-boggling. And also, I was going to contact a Mahua, who is a renowned lineage that works with the Noya Rao, the Tree of Light. It's just difficult to get commitments that far out from a lot of like really indigenous folks. They just don't really operate like that. So we'll see as we get closer exactly what we're going to do. But it's going to be awesome. And it's going to include at least a 3-day boat ride into the jungle with indigenous guides. So that's awesome. And then the Sacred Valley event, we're going to, at the climax of it, we're going to go high up into Incan holy site and have a San Pedro ceremony. Leading up to it, we'll have ayahuasca, and for people that are interested, bufo as well, but that has to be with space between the other medicines. So if you choose to do that, you have to sit out of some other things. So yeah, shoot me an email if any of that sounds interesting to you. And of course, we'll be working on consciousness-related subjects of all kinds, ritual magic and metaphysical discourse and all that, as people wish. And they're small groups, so, you know, it makes it easy for us to decide what we're going to do. We run things really loosely, so people want to go for a hike, we can go for a hike. And if you want to go see a ruin, we can go see a ruin. And then we'll have, you know, certain days designated for definitely this is what we're doing. So especially the Sacred Valley one will be pretty casual. So looking forward to that. The solar maxim is hopefully going to be in July, and so that's why we had it for that time, because it's my belief that we are connected to the sun in a way that profoundly affects our consciousness, and every solar cycle, we also undergo cycles that correspond with it. And that's why 11 actually is the number of magical expansion, because as these solar cycles intensify, our precognition and, you know, also insights, you know, we're able to shine more light and into the recesses that we have been unwilling or unable to look. And then at the peak of it, after the peak of it, our ability to sort of manifest things is at its highest, at the low. So it's internal, at the increasingly up until the maximum, and then external. expressions of will. Me too, occult examiner. What's your best, easiest tech for San Pedro? Oh, I already answered that one. I just wanted to what in the hell, man? Sorry, guys. I just got this weird message. It's been happening to me like every 10 minutes that YouTube is like, we need to verify that it's you. I don't know why it's like constantly happening, but I got to go find my phone so I can do that. Okay, yeah, sorry about that. I don't know what the hell is up with that. It's been like literally every 15 minutes all day or something. Your question about why LSD might be making you feel bad, there's a number of things, you know. It could be your diet. It could be that it is, if it's all from the same source, it could be that it's not LSD. LSD actually is not, there's no such thing as dirty acid. That's a myth, a street myth. And I know this because I've never ever met any LSD chemists in real life many times. And they never ever told me to think about it. And, you know, you're taking 100 micrograms of something, micrograms, microscopic amount, right? What do you think is in there that is so potent that you're going to notice it when you take it? I mean, even if it was pure cyanide or arsenic, you wouldn't notice it. So it doesn't make any sense, first of all. And at worst, if someone is successful in making it, it's going to be like 30%, I think. What do you call it? Whatever, you know, the stuff that you're supposed to wash out. So that's not it. There's no such thing as that. And it could be something internal, you know, like I was saying earlier about my mushroom flu experience, and then realizing that it was mommy issues. And then once I dealt with them, it didn't happen anymore. So it's hard to say, man. I would try changing up your source and doing some shadow work, you know. That's where it's at. And that's what's up. So, all right, I'm going to check in with the chat again, and if you guys don't have anything for me, I'm going to do a music stream tomorrow, and I'm happy to announce that I finally have no more offset in the sounds, which was just ruining it. I mean, it's unlistenable. So it's going to be, finally, I'm going to have, you know, that I'm not going to sound like a fool that's playing out of time. And, you know, it was also squashing my sound because I had settings wrong and stuff. So it's good now. The problem is that my backing tracks are going to be MP3s instead of videos where I can watch where the changes and solos go and stuff. So I'm going to be lost a lot, I'm afraid. But anyways, tomorrow's sound should be the best sounding stream that I've done so far. And that is a huge relief to me because I've put so many hours into just trying to get it all set up and satisfying. It's still not satisfying, but it's at least not annoying. Anyways, so let me check in with the chat one more time and see what's up. What's up, JD? Good to see you here. Does he not see us here? Yeah, I do, but I don't see any questions. Oh, have you tried different types of Trichoceres bergesi? How do they differ? Yeah, I have, and they do. I don't actually know which is which, though. Really, I don't really know what I'm looking at. I know it's a Peruvian torch. You know, I know those terms. So the Ecuadorian cactuses that you can actually find on my channel. There's a video where I went to a giant ancient. These things were like 30 feet tall. One of them had like 125 arms. I mean, insane. And sadly, I went back one day to collect some, and somebody had cut the biggest one down, and it was strewn. You see it in the beginning of one of the videos on my channel. It is like almost the length of a football field. You know, half a football field is like covered in just arms and piles everywhere. And you see this huge trunk that looks like the base of an oak tree, and it's actually it was the cactus. But anyways, you hike back there into the mountains, and they were just everywhere, and they're just massive, huge, huge cactuses. And those were really, really strong, but they were disgusting. And this taste would stick to your tongue for like the entire experience. You know, it's like almost like you were oozing it back out through your pores or something, and you just felt like you had just integrated cactusness and taste into every cell in your body. And I did not like that. And they also made you vomit a lot. But I mean, it was a great experience. I have a video where I drank some of one of those and went and played a show, and I actually drank much more than I had intended. And so, you know, I'm up there with just a laptop and a guitar, and somebody's like, hey, play Red House. And I don't know that song, and I don't play Hendrix, and I didn't even listen to Hendrix when I was younger. So I don't know Hendrix. And I was like, okay. And I pulled up a backing track and just destroyed it. And while I was doing it, I realized that I could focus my full attention on all these different windows, one for my fret hand, one for my strumming hand. And so I could think about improvising rhythms with my full attention in my strumming hand, but also I could think about improvising with my fret hand fully consciously, and my vibrato and my voice, and into, you know what I mean? I had all these windows, and it's like full attention on each of them, but 8 of them, you know? And you can tell if you watch the video. Another weird thing about that video is that, or that performance, is that even though I don't listen to Hendrix, I checked recently. This was only like a year ago, and I think I played this performance like 10 years ago or something. And I went and listened to some Hendrix, and I realized that I was doing all these Hendrixisms I've never even heard before in that video. You know, like using the major 6 in a minor pentatonic and stuff, you know, that Hendrix did all the time that I'd never even heard him do because I didn't listen to him. So that's trippy. And then the Peruvian cactus is lighter. It doesn't taste as bad. It doesn't stick on your tongue as long. It's not as strong, but it's plenty strong. Yeah, so I don't know. That's the best I can do with answering that. I know the Bolivian ones are supposed to be really, really strong, but if I had a choice so far, I would definitely take the Peruvian torch over the Ecuadorian, which I think was Bergesi. I'm not even really sure. But I was in southern Ecuador, so whatever grows wild around Malacatos is what I was eating there. Oh, and also the character of it, the experience. I think I would say that the Ecuadorian cactuses were darker. You know, there was more of like a sort of intimidating presence. Whereas the cactus here is just like light and fluffy, and it doesn't really have that like heavy kind of doomy. Like when people talk about like the Father in the sense of the terrifying aspect of God, that's kind of what you felt like you were summoning when you drank the Ecuadorian cactus. Oh yeah, I recorded it. It's on the channel. If you just search my channel for Red House, you'll find it. It was strange to watch because I was doing a lot of stuff that I don't do. You know, at one point I was playing what I'm pretty sure were Eddie Van Halen riffs. Like I've never learned any of that stuff. And it was just really strange to watch because there was so many things that I played that were so uncharacteristic of me. Like I don't ever do that stuff, and it happened anyways. I was also playing a $200 new $200 new Jackson 7-string metal guitar, which is weird. It doesn't sound cheap, and it doesn't sound like, you know, one of those guitars either. It's really, really interesting how psychedelics and energy interact with music. You know, it's almost like it allows you to plug in your soul when you plug in the guitar. You know, man tuned guitar tunes man kind of thing. But deeper than that, you know, there's some kind of energy that comes through when you take psychedelics and play that is much more rare and generally much more weak if you try to do it without it. You know, I think I've gotten there a couple times, but to do it consistently, like a 80 to 100 micrograms of LSD before a performance, just almost guarantees that like lightning is going to strike. the whole night. Definitely advisable, as long as you're really competent with music and experience with psychedelics. It's definitely a huge asset. Is it ancestral with the cactus? My opinion of Pink Floyd, they're cool. I play Pink Floyd. I really like Echoes a lot. It's probably my favorite song to play, but I've noticed whenever I do it online, people clear out. So it's too bad. It's like my favorite song to play, but I guess it's not a favorite of the people that. Yeah, they're cool. I mean, I don't understand how people could take. And I will get back to your question, JD. I didn't forget, but I don't understand how people like Roger Waters could take and that much psychedelics and know the stuff he did at like 25 based on the lyrics. Like Echoes, for example. And at 31, I guess he was, when they did Dark Side of the Moon, he had the wisdom of like a 90-year-old man, if you're lucky, But then he was a complete douchebag about money, even though he was born into aristocracy and was basically born richer than most people can imagine. And then he's fighting with David Gilmour about like a fraction of a percentage point. It's mind-blowingly fucking stupid. And then also the political stuff, he's a puppet of the left at this point, and I'm not a right winger. I don't like them either, but both sides are just the same thing, and he should know that. And he's out there promoting all, like just like a propaganda outlet, and that bothers me. But back in the day, they were awesome. So the ancestral component of the medicine, that's a difficult thing to answer from a materialist point of view. It's an entourage effect. The reason that San Pedro is so much different than peyote is lafophorine is not present, for one thing. Lafophorine is a cyanide analog that's in the tufts of the hair, and it's in the rest of the cactus, but it's more concentrated in the tufts. So peyote is a lot more difficult and has a completely different feeling. Completely different phase of the same feeling, or you know what I mean. Very different. Pure mescaline is completely different. So I have to say that for sure the entourage effect is a huge part of it. Is it the whole thing though? I mean, in the Hermetic tradition, like we believe that symbols sort of accrue power when magicians use them. Right. And not just magicians, but people associating symbols with power actually gives those symbols power, whether it's only in the collective unconscious or it doesn't really matter. It's still power. Right. So could it be that people working with these cactuses and perceiving them a certain way over time has actually sort of affected their characteristics? Sure. Could the place where they grow have an impact in terms of energy? I would imagine so. If it's true that all information is preserved at the quantum level, then everything that's happened in a place is always there, and here's a different angle on that though. People think that things absorb the influences around them. And that scientist, the Japanese guy, that was totally fake, by the way, the guy with the ice crystals, there was no reality to that at all whatsoever. It was not real. He faked the whole thing. They were just snowflakes that he took pictures of. It was not real. Nothing about it was real. And if you look at the last slide where it says, he said, "You are ugly, I hate you," to the water, and it's all yellow and green, and there's obviously like oil in it, you can't dye it. Go tell your water that it's ugly and stupid and see if it turns green and yellow. That's not something that's going to just show up on a, you know what I mean? It's stupid. It's completely stupid. So you can't use that. You can't say, well, that Homodo guy, that wasn't real. But my opinion is that a lot of people that you meet that are very new agey and plant medicine-y and spiritual supposedly are, they seem to think that the more spiritual you become, the more susceptible you are to hostile influences. And I think that's the complete opposite of the truth. So, to me, it means that you're impervious, that you found yourself, that you have substance, and that your electromagnetic field, your sidereal body, your etheric body has been fortified. It's structurally sound. And so you would think that if something like mescaline is divine, that it would be the same, that it would be itself no matter what is around, no matter what has influenced it. It's always going to be of the light, for the light, and by the light, period, end of story, because it's what it is, you know? So I don't know, you know, basically, long story short. But yeah, you would hope that like mescaline is not some like, what is it? When you can influence someone really easily. You know what I mean? I don't need to beat this horse to death. It's the new cage. Yeah, the water energy. Well, he froze water. He said they would like say things to it and freeze it. And it shaped the crystals in all these different ways, and it just wasn't real. It was totally fake. Ice crystals don't do that no matter what you do to them. Other laboratories tried to recreate the experiment and got nothing but just regular ice crystals, because that's what happens when you freeze water. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that, you know, water can't carry intention or whatever, but the way that he tried to prove it, he staged it and lied about it. None of it was real. He deliberately lied about it, and he knew he was lying about it. And what gets me about people believing it is that the last slide was so obviously dyed different colors. You can't alter your results and call it a scientific experiment. To say that the crystals had formed because of the intentions, okay, but to like show a picture of obviously like discolored water, I mean, it was so obvious that gave it away as fake. That one slide, like, nope, this is bunk. You know, it wasn't hard. It took me all of a glance. You know, I mean, the problem is, and it's not even necessarily that people are dumb. It's just when people want to believe something, they want to believe something, they just disengage critical faculties, and then it doesn't happen. You know, and I don't think that's what spirituality is about. You know, people like to say that there's no objective reality, that everyone's truth is their truth and whatnot, but that's only true to an extent. It's not completely untrue, but it's only true to an extent. In fact, I saw an actual scientist on TikTok the other day saying that because these 4 physicists had measured a wave function, and their observations about the results were all different to a tiny degree, his conclusion from that is there's no such thing as truth, because, you know, their perspective had some kind of like minuscule effect at a minuscule level in the subatomic realm. That doesn't mean there's no truth. That means that our perception of reality has minuscule differentiation. It doesn't mean that there's no truth. You know, so people take stuff and they just run with it in ways that I think is destructive. You know, there is objective truth, and you need to know that, and you need to accept it. And you're going to be at a disadvantage and a disability if you can't or you won't. You know, and the refusal to is just showing that people just can't cope with reality. You know, most of pop culture spirituality is just basically a profit-driven, marketability influenced drivel. You know, manifestation coaches that act like, you know, just think your way into $1 billion, and it's like, well, why are you writing books and doing seminars then, instead of just thinking? You know what I mean? Like, it's not that this stuff is completely untrue, but it's so much of it has been just kind of engineered for marketability and people's preying on people's escapist tendencies. You know, that it's bunk. I had one other thing to say about that, and it has escaped me, which is irritating. Anyways, let me, oh, wait. Yeah, no, I did say that. Okay. Check in with the chat one more time. Please speak on Bufo. Sure thing. Any experience with a boga? No, I do know a lot about it, but I've never taken it, and I don't know if I would. How do you think musicians stay consistent on tour? What do they take? Is it just psychedelics or stim? Well, it depends on who you're talking about. You know, I mean, people take all kinds of things. And the reality is, if you take it in the right measure and your health is still good, almost all of it helps. You know, not cocaine. Cocaine doesn't help anything. But that's just the honest truth. You know, it is. But the reality is that most people don't have the disposition, you know, to navigate that without making mistakes, you know. And so psychedelics are a little different, but I'll get back into that. Somebody had asked, okay, iboga, but that's not first. What was the first thing I saw? Oh, Bufo. Yeah, let's talk about Bufo. Bufo is a weird thing. In case anybody out there doesn't know, it's basically 5-HO-DMT and 5-MeO-DMT. I have theorized that the 5-HO-DMT is converted into 5-MeO-DMT when it's heated because the experience is not like 5-HO-DMT at all. It's like 5-MeO-DMT. So there's some debate about that. People say it doesn't happen, that there is no conversion when you heat it. I don't know if I believe it. So anyways, Bufo does not have an indigenous history of use, a traditional history. The guy that created that perception has been totally busted. There is no indigenous people in Mexico smoking Bufo ever before this guy went down there and told them all to pretend like they had a tradition so that they could create a tourist industry. That's what happened. So if you have any shamans out there claiming that they're from a long lineage of Bufo shamans, they're lying. There's no such thing. There has never been any such thing. There's no Bufo shaman. It is, the way that I explain it is that most psychedelics disengage the, what was I calling it? The throttle. That's not the word. They take the filter down to an extent, you know, and Bufo turns it off at a high dose. 5-MeO-DMT turns it completely off. Do not take it after ayahuasca. You will die. It's contraindicated with everything, basically. Not really everything. Psilocybin's not, weed not, you know, but careful. Also, it's not something that you can take a large dose of by yourself, because sometimes people get up and run around and you're not in your brain, like, you know what I mean? It's like a blackout. It's a whiteout, actually. We call it a whiteout. So you have to have a sufficient number of people there, or one person that is capable of completely restraining you, just in case that is necessary. Or you have to take you can ease your way in. It's not like in DMT where you have to like really rapidly inhale a bunch of it. You can take, as much time as you need, as far as I can tell. And so at lower doses, it's more like psilocybin or something, or it's hard to explain. It's not really. It is, light visuals. It's a great aphrodisiac. A lot of couples use it to connect at lower doses. My partner and I have definitely can vouch for its efficacy. As you increase the dosage, hallucinations don't really increase. Eventually, it just becomes a sort of whiteout. And at really, really high doses, there's not even an observer to explain the experience. And what I think it is personally is that it deactivates the entire filter on the nervous system and it puts you in the ultimate reality. So if you want to know what happens, not when you die even necessarily, but like at the end of time, when at the absolute core of the universe in the Kabbalistic system, there's an absolute nothingness that sustains all of creation, and that's what it puts you in. And then you're back. And the advantage of that, among other things, is that any problem that you have afterwards seems like nothing. Anxiety problems are often resolved with a single strong dose of Bufo. So that is important. And also it strengthens the dendritic spines in your brain, which enhances memory to the extent that about 2-3 weeks, a month ago, I don't know, some time ago, not too long ago, I took a relatively small hit and I put something together that was absolutely devastating, that should have been obvious to me, that I had not thought of once since it happened. And I've told that whole story. If you look up the I Accidentally Ghosted Bob Weir video, if you want to know what I'm talking about, like the biggest mistake I've ever made in my life, and I didn't even really realize I had done it. Blocked it out of my mind. The Bufo was like, "Hey, remember this?" And I was like, "Holy fuck!" Just all immediately, wild. But yeah, so you can take smaller doses of it, like threshold doses, to build your memory up, to heal depression. It's one of the best tools in our kit for sure. And it's really pleasant, at lower doses where you're not like completely whited out. It's not like other psychedelics where it's like kind of uncomfortable and crazy, at least the onset. Not in my experience anyway. So like really pleasant and peaceful and easy, I wouldn't recommend it on YouTube, but as far as like, just he's asking about 1P LSD and ALD. I don't know about the second one. I'm assuming it's a analog of ALD 52. 1P LSD is fine. It's a prodrug for LSD, so it's just going to be weaker because it's metabolized in the body and you lose about 30%. But it goes in 1P, and when it's metabolized, it becomes LSD. So it's fine. It's the same thing, really, except you can't get arrested for it in some countries. And ALD 52 is probably even better because as soon as it makes contact with H2O, it converts to LSD. So that would be the best analog. I don't know if that's the LALD or whatever that you were asking about. But yeah, those things are totally fine. No hay una problemita con estos. Yeah, so by the way, you guys hit the like button, please share, subscribe, consider becoming a patron. We are demonetized, so I do all this for free unless we get support from the community. And as the economy has been tanking in the United States, that has been fewer and further between for this channel over the last couple of months. So we do appreciate it when you throw us a bone or a life raft, as it were. So I don't know. Let's see if there's any more questions in the chat. It's getting kind of late here, and I'm still getting ready for the music stream tomorrow, which I'm excited is not going to have the out of the syncing problem, because man, it was like embarrassing to go back and watch those, and it just sounds like I'm just playing behind the beat everywhere, and it was just such a mess sometimes. So I'm happy to have fixed that. The mix should sound like a real mix too, because I learned about saturation and a glue bus, and also putting reverb in there and compression to make everything sound like it's in the same room. So it's not like, just kind of before it sounded like it was like two different recordings or something playing, and it's not really that pleasant. All right, so questions? Anyone? The dieta is no sugar, pork, or sex kissing. LOL. That depends on who you ask. I bought Bob and Son at Anything I Should Know. Yeah, next time order it from us. Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of things you should know. The effect is generally going to be pretty subtle. You know, it's one of the plants that you really do kind of need a dieta for to sensitize yourself to the effect of it. It depends on what part of the plant you use, whether it's what kind of effect it has. You know, the roots are the most potent, just like most plants. When you make paste, you usually use roots, but then the flowers, you know, are used for echororeception and energy and as an aphrodisiac, and the twigs also are kind of in the middle of the two things, which makes sense, I guess. So what part of the plant you use makes a difference, and it's used for lucid dreaming energy, but not tweaky energy. It's not like caffeine or something. It's a different kind of energy. I oftentimes put it in ayahuasca. It's an admixture plant that it does. I think it has an effect on the brew. One of the theories about this is that ayahuasca sensitizes you to other plants, and then you're able to get more benefit from them when you take them in conjunction with ayahuasca, but you have to be careful which ones you do that with. Bobensana is totally safe. There's no possibility of any problems with it. Yeah, I don't know. Without knowing what your purpose is, it's hard to tell you, but you're going to need to have a really clean diet, and to really get any dramatic changes from it, you'd need some weeks of seclusion and whatnot too. But if you even take, I think, ayahuasca microdoses in conjunction with Bobensana or any other plant, any plant really, it's going to increase the effect. So it's heart opening too. I don't think I mentioned that. That's one of the main applications of it. Yeah, I don't know what else to say about that. I saw another question. Oh, the sugar pork. No, that's not really true. I don't eat pork anyways, but I wouldn't eat it close to ayahuasca for some reason. But the reality is that most of the dieta stuff is fabricated. Ashaninka woman that I've worked with told me that the only real dieta that they observed was plantains and fish. You know, you just eat plantains and fish. But generally, like for the Shuar, for example, the tradition I was taught in, There's no prohibition of meat unless you're going to try to become a shaman. If you're training to become a shaman, then it's 3 years of no sex, no meat. But, you know, otherwise, if you're just drinking it, and after that, you know, once you're a shaman, then we drink ayahuasca and then pass monkey stew around afterwards. There's no reality to the whole vegan agenda of not eating meat with ayahuasca. Sorry, I hate to burst everyone's bubble, but it's just not real. I've never met indigenous people that like do that unless they're imitating what they know the tourists expect them to do, you know. But if you actually go into the deep jungle, you know, and drink with even Shipibo, they might have chicken the same day. So personally, I think the thing is no medications, no pharmaceuticals, definitely no SSRIs. I avoid all processed foods. I don't avoid panela, but I do avoid white sugar. I don't avoid salt necessarily, but I don't ever buy white salt. You know, for me, I think it's about processed food. I will eat meat the same day as ayahuasca in a heartbeat. There's no problem at all. It doesn't change the experience. None of the crap that people tell you is true, at least not for me or anyone that I know, anyone that I've ever worked with. You know, unless you believe this stuff, then it's not true. Aged meat could raise levels of things that you don't want, you know, but generally chicken or something is fine. And for me, it's about not eating processed foods. And what I have seen is people that eat nothing but processed foods, ayahuasca doesn't even work. I had one couple that came to me that ate, like, I didn't know what was wrong at first. You know, I told them, I was like, did you do the dieta? You know, because I at least advise people to avoid, you know, processed food and you know, pork, and definitely white sugar and white salt. But, you know, they're like, oh yeah. And I was like, I don't understand. We drank and nothing happened at all. Finally, I did get it figured out. But it took a lot of effort. And, then when it was over, they asked me if I wanted a sandwich, and I was like, yeah, sure. And they brought me like most processed white bread with processed bologna, processed cheese, and I was like, oh my God. I was like, do you guys always eat like this? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, that's why the ayahuasca didn't work. And I think it's because I suspect aluminum lodging in the receptors, and then there's nowhere for the DMT to seat. So, or it damages them, you know, and we know that aluminum causes dementia and Alzheimer's. Right. So anyways, I do believe that the food additives will obstruct the experience, but it's not about red meat or whatever, you know, or even salt and sugar. It's just don't eat processed food. I don't believe in the sexual energy thing either. Part of that, I think, arose. There are reasons for this, but it depends. You know, I don't think it should be never. But for one thing, people don't want that kind of energy in ceremony, right? Because this whole thing of having a bunch of strangers get together and consume ayahuasca is not natural, and it probably doesn't make sense. You know, you want to be in your own energetic bubble. You're opening yourself up to all of this stuff, and until you are, you know, shaman level, you are more receptive to the things around you, and you don't notice them and stuff because you're caught up in the experience, and you know what I mean. So I think that element of the protocol kind of came from people trying to get things under control. Also, anything that messes with your serotonin levels around ayahuasca is potentially deadly, so you don't want to do that. There's actually a condition, not really a condition even, but people under 25, it's rare, like 1 in a million people can have just naturally elevated levels of serotonin. They'll drink ayahuasca even a tiny bit and they will just die. It's rare, but it happens, you know. So, you know, sex, masturbation before ceremony, nope, not the same day for sure. Afterwards, probably fine. But I would say it's more about your connection with the person. You know, if you're having some sleazy, weird tryst with someone, or it's a toxic relationship, and then you have that energy mixed up with the too close to the ceremony, then yeah, that's not good. So it depends on the circumstances, I think, you know. Definitely leave it out of ceremonial space. You know, that's not the time or the place. I can't imagine anyone being inclined to that. It's really weird when I hear about things actually happening during ceremonies. Like, I'm not even saying because of the judgment. I just physically cannot imagine that that would be appealing. Like you just don't, and my headspace, like that's not somewhere I'm going with ayahuasca in my system. So I don't know. I don't know what the hell happens there. I guess some people are just, twisted like that, but no, thank you, man. Not me. The toad, however, that's a different story. And San Pedro is the best aphrodisiac or enhancement, compound that you can possibly take. The only thing that maybe rivals it is LSD and MDMA together. That's like the creme de la creme of romantic enhancements. Yeah, throwing at meat on Aya. No, I'm not saying I would eat it close enough to the ceremony that I would be vomiting it up, but I'll eat chicken for lunch on a ceremony day for sure. Just looking to see if I missed anything. What is this? Bufotenin, also known as 5-hydroxy and dimethyltryptamine. Yeah, that's what I don't know. I don't understand the thing about bufo. People saying that greetings from Chile. I look at you and can't understand why you're so anxious. I don't feel like I'm anxious. What's the deal with pork anyway? Like all the animals in the world. Oh, dried powder or fresh? Definitely fresh, blended up. But it's not difficult. It's really an easy extraction. People talk about boiling it for 18 days and stuff I've seen online. I'm not trying to make fun of people's traditions, but from a pragmatic point of view, that makes no sense. There's no reason to do that ever. It's out. All of it's out in a few hours. And I do it 3 times to try to make sure it's all extracted. But people have told me that's not even necessary. So, but powder is fine too. It doesn't really matter that much. But I think the fresh material gives the best results. Also, it's just, I don't know, honestly, because I've never tried to make brew from powder, I don't think, now that I think about it. I have taken it, I've eaten the powder, and it works fine. I don't know. It works either way, I guess. I don't think it matters that much. I think the fresh extraction is the easiest thing to do. I think I saw something else, too, in there that I should address. Somebody said, "What's the deal with pork, anyways?" Actually, it's because it'll kill you. What is it called, like trichinosis or something? Also, I think that we have everything in nature is disinclined to eat really sentient things, right? And like tigers eat people, I guess, but lions generally don't unless one does, and then they have a taste for it apparently, but generally not. Sharks don't generally eat people. And even there was a case where lions protected a 3-year-old. There was like 3 lions, and these guys were abusing her, and the lions chased them off and sat with the girl until help came. Humans came and got the kid. So, pigs are smarter than dolphins, maybe. At least the potbelly pig, which was only discovered in 1988. And I was actually tripping. I was sitting on my couch, and I had got this little piglet, a potbelly piglet, and I had just gotten it. And I ate some mushrooms, and I never normally do this. It was really weird because I don't watch television. I never had one in my house as a kid, and I only had one then because my girlfriend wanted to watch TV sometimes. So she's like, "Can I bring over a TV so we can at least watch movies?" And I was like, "Whatever." So it was a TV, and I turned it on, and it was the Discovery Channel, and it was a documentary about potbelly pigs, and I was just like, "What the fuck? What are the chances?" And I'm looking down at the pig, and he's just sitting on the floor, staring at me with his little snout just moving around, just staring dead in my head, And I look back at the screen, and they're like, recent research has demonstrated that potbelly pigs may be smarter than dolphins. And I was like, what the fuck? And I looked at the pig like, oh my God, I can't believe this. And then they had the pigs sorting things by color, by shape, putting numbers in order, and all this stuff. And after a while, I I figured out 18 different sounds that the pig made for, I want food was different from water, going outside, you know, it had all these different sounds for specific things that it wanted. So yeah, I think that's another reason not to eat pork. It's too smart. I don't eat octopus because of that. It has more brains than we do. I'm not eating it, you know. Yo, Gates, what's up? All right, guys. Well, I think I've addressed all of your questions and concerns about the psychedelic realm. I hope all of you have enjoyed the stream and continue to frequent them in the future. We got our work cut out for us coming up here directly. You know, the world is coming apart at the seams, and like it or not, if you have heard the word, then you have been called to stand up. So accept your duty, and I will be there right beside you, cheering from Peru. You guys, careful up there in the States. Yeah, good night, guys. I'm hungry, so I'm going to go get some food. And please hit the like button, share, subscribe, consider becoming a patron. There are options to support in the chat. Also, one-time PayPal, Zelle, all that stuff. So